Ezra Hashem. That's definitely needed. Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Yomi, and we're going to start from a little bit daf Tezayin and Beis by Hikter Shumshimim. So here we go. Let's just review what is pigel. Pigel means that you could make the leftover of the carbon mincha, you could turn that into a karis. That means that if you would eat it, if you bake it into matzahs, let's say, you get karis. Now, how do you do that? So what the kohen would do is, let's say we've been discussing when you do the haktara on the kamitza and the pieces of lavoina. Okay, so if you do the haktara, as you can see this kohen throwing it on the mizbeach, if you do it with the intention of eating the shirayim chutz lizmanoi, like beyond its designated time, so then by just saying that, you invalidate the whole carbon mincha. And if somebody would eat that mincha, what does he get? Karas. Our Mishnah discussed the possibility of, let's say, he throws the kamitza into the fire, but not the lavoina. And he just thinks when he throws the kamitza in the fire that he's going to eat the shirayim chutz lizmanoi. So that's called pigel b'chatzi amatir. He was only half through the service, only half the service he thought a pigel thought. So then Rameir says you made the carbon mincha pigel, and Chacham said no, you have to have the pigel thought not only by the kamitza, but also when you throw the lavoina into the fire, you have to have the pigel thought. So that is the basic things that we had yesterday. Let me just bring this up. So now the Gemara goes like this. The Gemara goes, what happens? Hikdish shumshimim lechol shumshim achakola kaimetz kulay. We mix it up. A guy was makdir just a small piece of the kaimetz and the lavoina, and he's thinking that he's going to eat a small piece of the shirayim chutz lizmanoi. So he's doing a haktara less than a shear, and he's thinking about eating less than a shear. But he did this 1,000 times over. So if you count all the 1,000 times over, every time he dropped the little kaimetz into the fire, he thought, I'm going to eat another piece of the shirayim chutz lizmanoi. Then he dropped another piece into the fire, and he said, I'm going to eat another chutz lizmanoi. Achakola kulay kaimetz kulay. So he didn't have the complete bad thought at one time. So Rav Chizda, Rav Hamnuna, Rav Sheshes, you have a three-way machlokes between these Amoraim. And Chad Amar, one said pigel, that all this is pigel. Chad Amar pasul. One said it's pasul, but it's not pigel. It means you can't eat the shirayim. You get an avera if you eat the shirayim, but you don't get kares. Chad Amar kosher, and one said kosher. So the Gemara says like this: Lema mandi yama pagel Rab Meir. The one that says pigel is like Rab Meir. Rab Meir is always strict and making things pigel right away. Even by a chatzi hamatir, Rab Meir says it's pigel. Mandi yama pasul karabanan. The one that says it's pasul karabanan. Rabbanan say and a chatzi hamatir is not pigel, but it's pasul. Mandi yama kosher kerebi. And the one that said kosher is like Rebbe. Rebbe has this new shita, like this. We saw this picture before, that if you shecht one sheep between the shtei alechem, and you're going to eat, you said, I'm going to eat kazayas, a half a zayas of A. And then you said, I'm going to shecht the second sheep, and you're going to say, I'm going to eat another half a zayas of B, chutz lizmanoi. So each one, the first one went to A, the second sheep went to B. Do you combine them? Rebbe says, no, it's kosher. It's too small, it's kosher, it's a half a matir and a half a zayas. So Rebbe says it's kosher. So that will be aligned with the opinion of the Aman Diyama that says by the Shumshim case, it's also kosher. So the Gemara wants to, like it always does, it tries to align Amoraim's opinion with Tanoim's opinion, which is strange because why does Amoraim have to have the same argument as Tanoim? So the Gemara says, Dilma, how do you know that your understanding is correct? Ad kan like Ka'ama Rameir Hasam El Lechisha B'Shiurei, Hachad Lechisha B'Shiurei Loi. Rameir, when his opinion of Chatzi Hamatir, he was said, well, let's say by the Kamitza, you had a bad thought about the entire Shirayim or the entire Kazayas of the Shirayim. So then Chatzi Hamatir will make it pigel. But if you're just going to have a thought about a shumshum of the Shirayim, even Rameir would hold it's not pigel. And Rabbanan had a problem, and they didn't passel only over there because you thought on the whole Shirayim, the whole matir, the whole Chatzi Hamatir, you already said that it's gonna you had a bad thought while you're doing a Chatzi Hamatir. But here it's different because every shumshin of the whatever you're being mocked there, you had a pigel thought. So you had a bad thought on the entire matir, both the kaimets and the levina. So maybe the Rabbanan will say in our case pogel. But kind of like Kamar Rabbanan Hasam, and Rebbe said over there that it's kosher. From that avoida, you didn't do more than a chatzizayas. So in our case, you eventually did a bad thought on the entire, and the bad thought on the entire matir, on the koimitz and the levina, and you had a bad thought about the entire shirayim. So even Rebbe would hold its pasuk. So the Gemara just says like this: Elaman the Amad Pigel Divrei Hakol, Mad the Amad Posel Divrei Hakol, Mad the Amad Kasha Divrei Hakol. All the Myroyim could come out like any Tana. It's a totally different machlekes. Man the Amad Pigel Divrei Hakol, the one that says Pigel Divrei Hakol, you didn't do anything wrong because Ksava Derech Achila Bakach, V'Derech Haktar Bakach. People eat less than a kazayas at one time, and people are makdir less than a kazayas at one time. So if the Haktorah, the entire Haktorah, each piece, you had a pigel thought on the entire Shirayim, so that's pigel. He holds, people eat less than a shumshum, but being makter, that's not the way you makter it. So it's like a mincha that you didn't even do any Haktorah at all. When you drop a drop at a time to be makter it, that's not Haktorah. So when you eat the mincha, you're eating a mincha that didn't have any kemitza done, and so therefore that's why it's only puzzle. It's not pigel. The one who holds it's kosher, he holds that you could be makter that way. So the haktorah is good, but the achila, by saying a pigel thought about an achila less than a kazayas on a shimshin and then keep adding it, that's not the way people eat. And therefore, it's not even a pigel thought. So therefore, he'll hold the whole thing is kosher. Okay, new Gemara. Amre Charife, we go to Amar Aleph. Amar Charife the Pompadisa. The sharp guys of Pompadisa, their name was Ephah and Avime. And they were the son of this person called Rachva. So they learned Haktorah Mefaleges Haktorah. Beautiful thing. That here's the picture again. If he's thinking, this guy is thinking a pigel thought while he's doing just the kamitza, throwing the kamitza in the fire, and he's thinking that I'm going to throw the levina in the fire, chutz lezmanai. So the pigel thought was about the levina while you're putting the kamitza in. So one haktorah could be mepagel another haktorah, and that will make the whole thing pigel. So so that's the Charife de Pompezisa, and they hold afilu do Amar Rabbanan ein mefagel chatzi amatir. Even according to Rabbanan, you can't be mefagel half a matir. That's how many hechadush chisha b'shirayim. That's because you're thinking of the pigel in the shirayim. If b'shas the chamitza, b'shas you're doing the haktarah, you're thinking about the leftovers. Yes. if you're just thinking about the leftovers while you're throwing the kamitz in the fire and not the levina, that's not going to aser. That's not going to make pigel according to Rabbanim. But if you think about while you're doing the kamitza into the fire, just about the levina, it's as if you had the whole haktorah with a thought that you're going to do it after chutz lizmanai. So while you're doing the haktorah, you say, I'm going to do this haktorah chutz lizmanai. So then you passel that. That's why the Rabbanan will hold, the chishev law b'levoina, since you had this thought by levoina, command the choshev late bay bekulimate darmi. It's as if you had the bad thought not only by the kamitza, but also not only by the levoina, by the kamitza as well when you're throwing it into the fire. So it's as if you had everything that was going on to the mizbeach, a bad thought. So therefore, the whole thing becomes pigel. Very important to know. A bad thought can be two methods of a bad thought to make a carbon pigel. You can have a bad thought that when you shech the carbon, let's say, I'm going to eat the meat in a week's time. So that makes the whole carbon pigel. But you can also have a bad thought when you're shechting the carbon that I'm going to give Hashem to eat chutz lizmanoi. And that is a bad thought regarding the haktorah. So here, you had a bad thought about the haktorah because you had a bad thought about the levoina. And even the Rabbanan would agree that once you have a bad thought about the levoina while you're throwing the kamitza onto the fire, it's as if the kamitza has that same bad thought. And therefore, the whole carbon mincha is pigel. Abba Rava said, this follows through in the Mishnah. The Zehaklal, the Mishnah says, Kol ha-koimetz v'noisim b'kli v'ha-moilech v'ha-makter lechol dova shadacher lechol lahakter dova shadarkai lahakter chutz l'mekoyme is possible by chorus chutz l'zmanai pigel b'chai by chorus. So what the Brisa says, that if you have a bad thought about the shirayim, that you're going to eat it, or a bad thought about the kamitza, which is supposed to be eaten, give it to feed to Hashem, so to speak. If you have a chutz l'mekoymai thought, that's not a pigel thought. Chutz l'zmanoi, that's a pigel thought. That's you got to remember. Chutz l'zmanoi, beyond its normal designated time, that makes the whole issue pigel. So my love, since we juxtapose the two, my love haktorah dumi dahana, ma hanach bein lechel bein lahakter. Av haktorah bein lechol bein lahakter. Just like by a pigel thought regarding the food, you could have a pigel thought regarding that you're going to when you're the koimitz, when you're doing the kamitza, you could have a pigel thought. Let's say the kohen is doing the kamitza. Let's go back to the kamitza. When he's doing the kamitza thought, he could have two pigel thoughts at that time. A pigel thought about the kamitza being done chutz lizmanai, or he can have a pigel thought about the shirayim that he's going to eat chutz lizmanai. This, since it's not a chatzi amatir over here, because you're only dealing with flour here, so therefore you can have a pigel thought both on the shirayim and what's in your hand. So also, when you are makdir on the mizbeach, you can have a pigel thought about the shirayim, and you can have a pigel thought about the levoina. And that's Rava is raya to what we just said. So the Gemara says, "Mala afaktora bein lechel lahakter loy hanach bein lechel bein lahakter haktora lechel in lahakter loy." No, who says you're right? Maybe, but when you makter it, you could only have a pigel thought regarding the shirayim, but not regarding the levoinim. It's not a good raya. Then the Gemara says, Yosef Rav Menashe bagade kamei de Abaya. And Yosef Ka'amar, Rav Menashe was sitting in front of Abaya, and he said in the name of Rav Chizda, the opposite. Ein haktorah mefaleges haktorah. When you're doing haktorah, you can't make a pigel with another haktorah. Finish. Once you did the kamitza, and you're throwing the kamitza onto the fire, you can't think about the levain. It's not going to passel. Doesn't work. Right? So now, the Rameya only said his opinion if you're thinking about the shirayim, because when you're throwing the koimitz onto the fire, if you're thinking about the shirayim, because the koimitz makes the shirayim permitted to eat. But the koimitz is never, by putting the koimitz on the fire, it's not making the levina permitted to eat. So therefore, a koimitz cannot have a bad thought about the levina to make the whole thing piggle. Even Rameya would agree to that. Amalei Abayas said to Rav Chizda, Rav Menashe. In other words, Rav Menashe is saying the story in the name of Rav Chizda to Abayas. So Abayas says, Ani Mori Mishmei de Rav. Please, did Rav say the same thing as Rav Chizda? Amalei En. Yes. It mename. Amar Rav Chizda Amar Rav. Rav Chizda said in the name of Rav, Ein Hakdara Asam Afalegas Hakdara. So this statement comes originally from Rav. Amar Rav Yaakov Bar Idi Mishmei de Rabaya. Afanam Nami Tanina. We learned it in a Mishnah. And here, and our Mishnah said the same thing. Shachad echad min akvasim lechem imenu lemachar. If you shechted one of the sheep to eat it tomorrow, which we had many times. You shechted one of the sheep. You shechted, let's say, one of the sheep to eat it tomorrow. To eat this sheep, remember, it's a shlamim. And you're supposed to shech two sheep to be able to eat the breads. But if you shechted one sheep to eat that sheep tomorrow, so the Gemara says, the Mishnah said, who piggle? That sheep is piggle. L'chaveri kosher. The second sheep is kosher. Lechel mechaveri l'machosh named kasherim. But if you have a piggle thought regarding one sheep to eat the other sheep to chutz l'zmanai, the other sheep is not piggle, and the first sheep is not piggle, because these are two matirs. Each one is a half a matir, as you can see on the screen. Each one is a half a matir, and therefore they cannot piggle each other out. So the same idea would be with the carbon mincha. The kaimitz, by a bad thought by the kaimitz regarding the levoina, you can't piggle each other out. That's what he's saying. So you have a clear raya from the Mishnah. My tama lamashim kivin lav mati today loy matzamafagale. You can't make a piggle on another mater. Loy. So the answer is wrong. Hasam hu delay ikva b'chad mana. Over there, they were never placed in one vessel. Okay, they were never placed in one vessel. The sheep and two sheep are separate entities. But here, as you can see in this picture, I mean, they put the lavoina right on top of the kmitza in this vessel over here. So because they are joined together, so to speak, maybe a bad thought on the kmitza could invalidate the lavoina. And then it invalidates the lavoina, of course. It's a bad thought that could mifagel the whole carbon mincha, because it's considered like one. Ama Rav Hamnuna Hamilsa Avlili Rab Chanina Ut Kilale Kakula Talmida. I learned these things from Rab Chanina, and it's as if I learned the whole Talmud. He taught me very short, and a short thing, I learned a lot from him. He said this case, Hikter Koimitz, a person was maktir the Koimitz. Lahaktir Levoina tomorrow, if he had in mind that he's going to maktir Levoina tomorrow, and Lechel Shirayim Lamachar, and to eat the leftovers tomorrow. So he had a double bad thought, piggle, it's piggle. So the Gemara says, my Kamashmalah, what did Rav Menuna teach us? If he's trying to say that a bad thought by the koimitz on the levoina could make the carbon piggle, so then let him just say the case, hikta koimitz lahakta levoina. He doesn't have to say lechel shirayim, he doesn't have to add that. Just koimitz, makta and koimitz, to makta levoina, that's enough to make piggle. If he's just trying to say the chiddush of mefalgin bechatzi mater, that means you could just have the piggle thought regarding the shemayim by the koimitz, so then skip the middle part. Hikter koimitz lechel shirayim lemacha, because the halacha is like Rab Meir. Itervaya kamashma, if he's saying both cases, lema he could say hikter koimitz lahakter levoina. He could say if you're makter koimitz to think about the levoina tomorrow, or the lechel shirayim lemacha, or he had in mind to makter the chaymitz to eat the shirayim lemacha, and that way you'll teach me both ideas, befalgin bechatzi amater and haktar mefaleges haktara. Amar Avad Barahavel oilam ksava ein haktar mefaleges haktara. This Rab Hamnuna doesn't agree. When you're thinking about the chaymitz, about the levoina, it's not going to possible make piggle the mincha. They mefalgin bechatzi amater. We don't paskin like Rab Meir either. Over here, it's different. The pasha le machshava b'kula mincha. That means that because you had like a double bad thought, even though each bad thought alone is worthless, but when you combine them together, it seems that you have a piggle thought, and therefore that's enough that everybody that's enough to make the carbon piggle. So he doesn't hold each one alone would make piggle, but when you combine both thoughts of koimitz, when you're doing the kamitza, you had a mind about the lavoina tomorrow, and you had a mind about eating to shirayim tomorrow. So because you had a double thought, it makes it piggle. Says the Gemara, finally, before we finish this, Tanatana Kamed Rab Yitzchak Barabba, Hikter Koimitz Lechel Shirayim L'divrei HaKoil Piggle. If you makter the koimitz to eat the leftovers, so then just the koimitz. You didn't think about, when you're doing the levina, you didn't think about the bad thought. Everybody holds its piggle. Wait a minute, everybody holds its piggle? Miflik pligi, the Rabbanan hold it's not piggle. The Rabbanan hold actually it's puzzle, but not piggle. Because they hold, in order to puzzle, you have to have a bad thought when you're doing the kamitza, and when you have a bad thought when you're putting the levina into the fire. You have to say l'divra called puzzle. At the very least, everybody holds its puzzle. So and it goes according to everybody. Velema, let it say areza pigel rameyu. Correct the brisa and say the brisa says it's pigel, and it's only going according to Rameir. And says the Gemara, Tana, the brisa said divrei hakol. That's the version that we have in the brises. Asni. So then we don't want to change that. Pigel b'pasal michalafle. A pigel to a puzzle word. Sometimes a mistake could happen when writing down the brisa. But if you want to say this goes according to a mayor, that you don't, person wouldn't make a change. So the best way to make this brisa make sense, it's possible. Now we go on to the next mishnah. Another 4 more minutes and then we'll stop. Okay, another 3-4 minutes because we had a late start. So hakoimitz is a mincha lechol dova she'ein darkoi le'achol. Again, what is a bad thought by a mincha? So remember, you can have a double bad thought. You can have a bad thought regarding eating the shirayim, the leftovers tomorrow, and you can have a bad thought of being maktir, the koimitz or the levoina tomorrow. That's a bad thought. One is going on to the mizbeach, and one is being eaten by humans. So now the Mishnah drays it around. What happens if you say, and when I see bad thought, it's not really a bad thought. The kohen actually verbalizes that. What happens? The kohen has this kamitza, does the kamitza and says, I have in mind that I'm going to eat this kamitza tomorrow. Well, the kamitza is never supposed to be eaten. Or let's say he has in mind and says, I have in mind that the shirayim, I'm going to be makter tomorrow. So he federate the whole thing around. So he says, I'm going to eat something that normally is not eaten, like the levoino or the kamitza. Or lahakter, and he has in mind, or he says, I'm going to be makter dova she'ein darkei lahakter, this thing that's normally not supposed to be makter. Let's say the shirayim, he says, I'm going to makter the shirayim tomorrow. So it's a nonsense thought. So kasha, the mincha is kasha. Reb Lezer paisel. Reb Lezer says it's pasal. And lecho, so we have to understand Reb Lezer's opinion. Lecho dava shedarka lecho lahakter dava shedarka lahakter. Let's say he had a normal pigel thought, but he was thinking pachas mikazayis, less than a kazayis. Let's say he has in mind, I'm going to be makter less than a kazayis on the mizbeach tomorrow of the kamitza, or he says, I'm going to eat less than a kazayis shirayim tomorrow. So then it's less than a kazayis is kosher. Lechel kachatzi zayis or lahakta kachatzi zayis kosher. Achilu aktar mitzdarfen. Even if you have a half a zayis of eating and a half a zayis of being makter tomorrow, with the appropriate, you said a half a zayis of the shirayim I'm going to eat tomorrow, and the half a zayis of the kamitza I'm going to be makter tomorrow. So then it's kosher because you can't combine them to make one kazayas to make the mincha pegel. Amar Abasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time with Rabbi Loza. What's the reason of Rabbi Loza? If you have a reverse thought, you could still make pegel. Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, the Torah talks about pegel, and the Torah says, if you have a bad thought about eating, now eating means Hashem is eating, on the mizbeach, and eating also refers that your human is eating. So if you have a bad chutz lizmani thought by both of these eatings, then it's a pigel thought. The Torah is talking about the two eatings. Echad achilas adam, echad achilas mizbeach. Whether God is eating or whether the person's eating, if you have a bad statement about that, you make the carbon pigel. Loi Melacha teaches you, since you can make a bad thought with the person eating, and you can make a bad thought about God's food. One can think about the shirayim or the basar that you're going to put it on the mizbeach, and what Hashem's going to eat, the human's going to eat. According to Rab Lazar, since the Torah said eat, so we can confuse the eating. I can give God his food, my food, and he gives me his food. And if I think chutz lizmanoi and saying chutz lizmanoi at that time, I can make it pigel. Why? Tama midababkinu rachmana laktara b'lashon echila. Because the Torah didn't call it maktir and ye'echal as two different things. The Torah considers it one thing: eating of Hashem and eating of a human being. So just like I can make pigel my own food, it's saying I'm going to eat it chutz lizmani, the shirayim or the basar, I could say about God's food that I'm going to eat it chutz lizmani, and I'm going to make it pigel. That's the opinion, the unique opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbanan, what do Rabbanan do? Hi, Dabkina v'Rachmana b'Lashon Achila. We go to Amid Beis and we'll stop in a minute. That the Rabbanan said, the loishna ki mechashav lashon mechila mizbeach, v'loishna ki mechashav lashon aktara lamizbeach. According to Rabbanan, the reason why it says heyochel yeyochel is because that means your language doesn't have to be makdir language. You can say I'm koimitz on the Tanai that I'm going to give Hashem to eat on the mizbeach tomorrow, and that's enough. That's why the Torah put it in Lashon Achila, but you still have to have in mind where it's exactly going. The Kemitza belongs to the Mizbeach, but you don't have to say, I have in mind, I'm going to be mocked around the Mizbeach tomorrow. You could just say, I have in mind, I'm going to give God to eat tomorrow. So that it doesn't matter if you switch that language. Iname, ma'achila b'kazayis, afak dar b'kazayis. Or you can teach me, hey, achel, ye'ochel, teaches you that the shear of pigel on the Mizbeach is kazayis, just like the shear by a human being eating. Concludes the Gemara. It's the normal way of eating. Concludes the Gemara. Rab Lazar. Why did Rab Lazar learn the Chachamim? Because him came, if it's true what the Chacham says, Lichtev Rachmana, the Torah should write im heochel, the same word twice. Or im yeochel, with a yud or a hey. My heochel, yeochel. Why does it write hey, heochel and yeochel? So Shramat Mina Tarta, you see two ideas from it. The first idea you see is that Chila Bekazayas and Haktaras Bekazayas. That's the second idea. But Rabbi Eliezer sees something different. He says that even if you reverse the roles, you could still make it pigel. I could say to Hashem's food that if I have in mind of Hashem's food, that I'm going to eat Hashem's food, kutz lizmanai, whatever belongs on the Mizbeach, I can make it pigel. Or I could say my food going on the Mizbeach, if Hashem's going to eat my food, chutz lizmani, it could also make pigel. And that's the unique opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. We're going to discuss it more tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem. Okay, sorry for the late start today. So the Gemara continues just a little bit further and says, Amalei Rabzei Rabasi, B'tayim de Rab Lezer b'shem hochi koros nami lechayev. If Rab Lezer he learns it from a pasuk, then there should be pigel. If you reverse the order, then according to Rab Lezer, there should be kares. Then there is kares if you reverse the order. So, and that's exactly what it says in our Mishnah. You look in our Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer says paisel. Rabbi Lezer says it's pasul, right? But now the Gemara's question is, if he really learned it from a pasuk of a meheyochel, yeyochel, then there should be chorus to it. So the chitei mahachinami, maybe you have to change the wording of our Mishnah that it should be pigel. Says the Gemara, but you told us in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that the einish of this is not kares, it's only puzzle. Amalei. So Rabbi Asi answered, Tanoi aliba de Rabbi Lazar. It's a machlokes Tanoim what he said, what Rabbi Eliezer said. I think it's Eliezer. What did he say? One held that Rabbi Eliezer said it's possible daraisa. And one said that Rabbi Eliezer said it's possible darabanan. The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Someone shechs a carbon. Okay, you're shechting carbon, and then he says, "I'm going to drink the blood tomorrow." So the blood belongs on the mizbeach. What are you saying? Are you saying I'm going to put the meat on tomorrow on the mizbeach? I'm going to eat the emurim tomorrow. So then it's kosher. It's a kosher carbon because you reverse the order. It makes no sense. It's kosher. Reb Lezer paisel. So here you see Reb Lezer says it's possible. Then lahaniach midomoi lemachar. If instead of saying I'm going to drink the blood, he says I'm going to lahaniach. I'm going to leave the blood tomorrow. I'm not doing anything with it. Rabbi Yehuda paisel. Rabbi Yehuda says it's possible. Amar Rabbi Lazar, and therefore the whole carbon is possible. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Here I believe it's Rabbi Lazar. Abazu Rabbi Eliezer paisel v'chama machshir. Even this, Rabbi Eliezer would be pasal and the Chama Makshira. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, Ali B'Daman. Rabbi Yehuda says paisel, and if it's by Al Haniach, and Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, says paisel. So let's think about this. Rabbi Eliezer, Ali B'Daman. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehuda, Ali B'Daman. Who does Rabbi Yehuda go according to? If Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Rabbanim by lishtos v'damai, wait a second. Over there, you said you're going to drink the blood, which is like eating the blood. Chachamim say it's kosher. If you're going to say lahaniach v'damai, certainly the Chachamim are going to say it's kosher. So Rabbi Yehuda holds it's definitely Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Lazar, right? Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. So Ella leave the Rabbi Eliezer. Vi Omar Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer said, Rabbi Eliezer paisel. Even in this case, Rabbi Eliezer passes and Rabbi Yehuda and the Chomer Machsha. But Rabbi Eliezer is saying pasel, and Rabbi Yehuda is passeling by Lahniach. So Rabbi Eliezer, I think they should say Rabbi Lazar or Rabbi Eliezer. Hainu the Rabbi Yehuda is the same thing of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, maybe they're both Rabbi Lazars, but this is Rabbi Lazar the Tana, and this is the Rabbi Lazar the Moira. So, what's going to be the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Lazar? Elala Koris Ik Benayu. The Rabbi Yehuda Sava Laniach Psula Ba'alma Bahanach. Psula ba'alma, bahan bakaris nami mechayev. Psula ba'alma, laniach psula ba'alma, bahanach, in a regular pigel case, kares nami mechayev. Ilaniach is only puzzle. By a regular case of pigel, you get kares. V'asar Rablaza, Lamema Rablaza says, even lahaniach, idividi, puzzle ve'ein by kares. I'm sorry. Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold, lahaniach is only puzzle. But lishtois, you get kares. And Rabbi Lazar says, no, that Rabbi Lazar says, Rabbi Eliezer will hold pasul ve'ein by kares, even by lishtois. So it's a machlokes what Rabbi Eliezer holds. So this we'll leave it. Is it, if you're going to reverse the order, is it kares, because it's learned from a pasuk, or is it pasul? And the Gemara now tries to say that maybe it's a machlokes. It's a machlokes what Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is on this matter. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem.